What is addiction? Is it just a physical thing that makes you famish for that substance? The short answer is no. Addiction is a neurological disease which needs to be treated. Addiction has such a wide scale that might include drugs, video games, television, alcohol, shopping, caffeine, and recently smartphones and social media. Addiction has behavioral, social, biological, and genetic reasons. Yet none of the reason is sufficient to explain the addiction by itself. Since there are numerous factors by consuming a substance to turn into an addiction, it is basically a biological process. Personal characteristics, environmental factors, genetic predisposition, accessibility to the substance, family structure, and socio-cultural features are main factors for a person to develop an addiction. What about coffee and tea? Does caffeine really make you addicted to them? Let's have a look in terms of addiction and focus on the benefits and damages of caffeine. Coffee is by far the world champion consumption-wise recently. It has been one of the most consumed beverages in our daily life. Personally, I'm not much of a tea person, yet I cannot imagine a life without coffee. It would be so boring. Coffee culture has become an important part of our lives, especially with the industrial chain of coffee brands and third-wave coffee shops. When we hear the word caffeine, we usually associate it with coffee. However, tea contains caffeine as well. So what is the amount of caffeine in a cup of coffee and tea? Although it depends on the kind of coffee you drink, the approximate amount of caffeine in a cup is 40 milligrams. To compare, we might say there's 11 in a cup of tea. Although it has a little amount of caffeine compared to coffee, tea might be regarded as addictive as well. Even though it is a familiar term to us thanks to coffee and tea, caffeine is actually a stimulant which animals have in their central nervous system. It is an alkaloid also known as matein. Coffee, tea, and as a little amount, cacao contain it. Caffeine has a characteristic bitter taste. It is added to some of fizzy beverages like cola in order to flavor them. It is known that caffeine is effective in analgesic medicines, cardiovascular disorders, and nervous system disease. Tea and coffee has been consumed for years in social activities. Naturally, it is not possible to determine a certain amount of caffeine that suits everyone. As long as you consume it in moderation, there are so many well-known health benefits of caffeine. You might say, so how much caffeine we should consume? Frankly, there is not a dosage for it. Acceptable, or we can say healthy amount of caffeine changes from one person to another. Yet, for an average and healthy person, caffeine is effective after 250 milligrams, and the acceptable total amount of daily caffeine determined by American FDA is 400 milligrams. After that amount, excessive caffeine might be harmful for your body, since the dosage is everything. As we mentioned in our detox video, everything is poison. Even if it is not the only determinant, the amount is one of the main factors to describe that substitute as beneficial or harmful for you. Contrary to what is believed, caffeine is not effective as soon as you get it. It starts showing the effect after 30 to 60 minutes it enters to the body. The half-life of caffeine in human body is about 5 hours, which means after 5 hours you get it, the amount of caffeine in your body diminishes by 50%. For instance, if you consumed 100 milligrams caffeine at 8 a.m., that amount would dip to 50 milligrams by 1 p.m. and 25 milligrams by 6 p.m. Ever since caffeine became a part of our lives, the obvious question has been asked about it whether it is beneficial or damaging for our health. Let's have a look at the benefits of caffeine first, and let us be clear, when we say coffee, we are talking about natural coffee beans that is used to make filter coffee, espresso, and the like. The instant coffees, which are heat processed, are not regarded as healthy. So how does caffeine work? Caffeine affects the synapses in the brain, which could be regarded as hard-working bees of central nervous system of the brain. When these synapses are stimulated by caffeine, it makes us able to think faster and be more energetic. Caffeine is the most used psychoactive stimulant in the world. When it reaches our brain, it makes the brain release dopamine and noradrenaline, which fasten neural transmission. That is the reason of the increase in brain activity. The studies show that caffeine increases attention, memory, and reflex in people. It is also regarded as a remarkable oil burner. The studies show that caffeine that is consumed before exercise increases the amount of oil burning by 3 to 11%. The hormones released by the brain and the increased amount of oil burning in the body leads to a faster metabolism and therefore an increase in the energy level. Another beneficial feature of caffeine is it contains a remarkably high amount of antioxidant. There are a high amount of antioxidant of polyphenol and hydrocinamic acid in caffeine, which protect our cells against DNA damage and oxidation. In addition, caffeine contains micronutrients like magnesium, manganese, iron, potassium, and B-complex vitamins like B2, B3, and B5. It also protects human brain against Alzheimer. Large-scale studies show that people which consume caffeine regularly has a low possibility to get Alzheimer by 60% because of the increased brain activity we mentioned. Another benefit of caffeine for the brain is it decreases the risk of getting Parkinson's disease. The reason of Parkinson is the weakening or death of the cells in the brain that produce dopamine hormone. Since caffeine increases dopamine level, it protects the brain against Parkinson. The studies show that people consuming caffeine regularly has a lower risk of getting Parkinson by 30 to 60%. It is also discovered through studies that it lowers the risk of getting type 2 diabetes. In those studies, it is seen that every cup of coffee decreases the risk of type 2 diabetes by 7%. Another well-known health benefit of caffeine is that it protects the liver. There are numerous studies show that positive effect of caffeine on the liver. Even though the mechanism cannot be figured out completely, it is discovered that coffee protects the liver against fatty liver and cirrhosis. An important survey showed that drinking 4 cups of coffee every day lowers the risk of cirrhosis by 80%. Finally, let's talk about the effect of caffeine on life expectancy. It is discovered that regular consumption of caffeine increases life expectancy remarkably, which corresponds to 20% in women and 26% in men. A 20-year-long survey showed that patients with diabetes consuming caffeine on a regular basis have a 30% lower death risk. We have mentioned only benefits of caffeine by far. So doesn't it have any damages for our health? Well, like everything delicious, of course it does. Especially on people who are not used to drinking coffee regularly, it might cause a general mood of anxiety and agitation. This isn't experienced that much by people who consume it on a daily basis. Another well-known side effect of caffeine is that it gives rise to sleep disorders. Especially for the people who don't drink it much, caffeine is known to reduce sleep quality when it is consumed late at night. Another negative side effect of caffeine is tachycardia. The general effect of stimulation of caffeine makes some people feel an increase in their heartbeats, and this might make them feel uncomfortable. Another important side effect of caffeine is it increases blood pressure. Like we mentioned earlier, releasing hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline makes the veins crinkle and therefore blood pressure increases. This tension irregularity might be serious, especially for the people who isn't used to caffeine. Yet there isn't any scientific data that consuming caffeine regularly increases blood pressure permanently. Another effect of caffeine is tremor on hands. If you have a tendency for tremor on your hands, caffeine might make your hands tremble. It could surprise you if we say caffeine can make you sluggish, but yes, it might. The increase in the general mood and physical performance after you consume caffeine might lead to a sharp fall as well that makes you a little weaker than before you consume it. It also might cause polyuria, meaning urinating more than usual because of the slight increase in heart rate and blood pressure. And finally, addiction. Even though it is not a substance that is classified as highly addictive, for people who consume caffeine regularly, the absence of it might cause some symptoms like a slight discomfort, lack of concentration, and tiredness. Addiction-wise, caffeine is not something that would make you have a heavy abstinence syndrome. Moderation is the key. As it goes for almost everything in life, a moderate amount of coffee is remarkably healthy and excessive consumption is harmful, and we are extremely grateful to the people who discovered it. See you in the next video.